that's interesting. Two thoughts flashed through my mind at exactly the same moment. And the first one was, I've never tried that. And the second one was, this audience is waiting for me to say something. What am I going to say? The best that I could come up with was, that's not mine. I'll tell you, that's also not my only embarrassing moment. Another one that came close to that happened at a gym. Anyone here go to gym on a fairly regular basis? Yeah? Okay, a couple of people around the room. Okay, for those of you who don't go, have you seen a gym on TV? Okay. You'll know that the first thing you see when you walk into any gym is the rows of treadmills. And you've got the ladies in leotards all running up a sweat and looking sexy on the rows of treadmills. Now, I arrive and I want to warm up, but the only one that's available is right in the front, right in the middle, and I'm the only guy. So I'm feeling a little bit self-conscious, but okay, I walk over and I get onto the treadmill. I start it up and I get up to 6 kilometers an hour, which is walking speed, and I put it a little faster, 8 kilometers an hour, start to jog, and I get up to 12, 13, 14 kilometers an hour. Now I'm running. And a friend I haven't seen in years spots me from the far side of the gym. And he comes walking past all the bodybuilders and around the ladies in leotards, and he stops next to my treadmill. And he does the logical thing to do. He goes, "Hey, Doug, how's it going?" So I do the logical thing to do, which is to turn and shake his hand. There I was, and then instantly there I wasn't. Of course, you can imagine the trouble with falling on a treadmill is you don't just fall down. It also spits you out the back. And if you do it just right, you can take out like 3 or 4 ladies in leotards on your way back. I ended up against the back wall with my ankles around my ears, trying to make it look like I did that on purpose. Well, folks, we're not actually here to talk about my embarrassing moments. We could keep doing that all day. What I would like to do this morning is to share with you a number of ideas, 10 of them in fact, about how to be a more powerful voice in terms of anything that you're doing. These are ideas that I've shared with people in public relations, with large organizations, and even with entrepreneurs who want to be known in their industry. I think this one is just right for you. You've been talking about, and this whole conference is about, dynamic leadership, becoming more, being an activist librarian. What I'd like to do is to give you 10 specific ways to do that, to actually be more of a voice in your community, to be perceived as experts, to be perceived as thought leaders. Now, the world is changing. So where most people would say, please switch your cell phones off, if you have them on, please go onto Twitter. You are more than welcome to tweet about anything that you learn. You can follow me on Twitter at Douglas Kruger, or you can simply make notes if you want to. If you don't feel like making notes, if you want to sit back and listen, you're more than welcome to do that too. Let's take a moment and talk about some of the people who have built up reputations in their own industries. Industries that are completely different to yours. And we're going to see what lessons we can learn from them and apply to the world of libraries. Let's start with this. If I had to ask you about 10 different industries that you are not a part of, do you think you would be able to name the top #1 expert in every single one? Yes, no? No? Okay, tell you what, let's give it a try. When you see the word, shout out the first name that springs to mind. Horror writing. Stephen King. It took us 0.25 of a second and 10 people had that, and it's the right answer. Very, very interesting. Stephen King talks about the difference between a well-known writer, and in fact a well-known anything, and people who are amateurs, aspiring, and wannabes. He says the difference is this. On Monday morning, I get up and I write 1,000 words. Somewhere on the other side of the world, an aspiring writer gets up, sits down at his computer, and he writes 1,000 words. And Stephen King, the world's best-selling writer at the moment, says, at this point, we're on a par. Here's the difference. Lunchtime comes and goes. Stephen King sits down and writes another 1,000 words. The aspiring writer comes back to his PC and goes, "That was pretty good," and takes the rest of the afternoon off. Tuesday rolls around. Stephen King sits down and writes 1,000 words. The aspiring writer looks at his PC, edits things a little bit, makes a couple of changes, and takes the rest of the day off. And that, he says, is the difference between greatness and people who never quite crack it in any industry. Honest, hard work. In fact, he actually says, this is Stephen King, talent is as cheap as table salt. What separates the successful individual from the merely talented one is honest, hard work. Right down to that. Okay, we're 1 for 1. Let's see if we can get another one. I'll give you a completely different, really obscure industry, bodybuilding. Arnold Schwarzenegger. It would have to be. Without the jacket on, I look fairly similar to that. I just don't like to show off. Quick survey around the room. Any of the ladies actually like that? You find it attractive? No? You know what happens? In a group this big, there's always like one woman sitting at the back, and she starts putting up her hand, and everyone says no, so she goes, "I'll keep that to myself." Arnold Schwarzenegger with all his catchphrases, what are some of them? Hasta la vista, I'll be back, come with me if you want to live. Or more recently, vote for me if you want to live. Or perhaps more recently still, help me to pay alimony if you want to live. Okay, now an interesting fact about this guy. He has won the Mr. Olympia contest in bodybuilding, which is their highest honor, 7 separate times, and that's amazing. Were you aware that there are 2 men who have won it 8 separate times? Ever heard of them? Do you know their names? No? Okay, that's interesting. Also, the first name that sprang to mind was this guy, Arnold Schwarzenegger. Do you know that the last time he competed as a professional bodybuilder was in the year 1980? Why do we still think of him? Well, there are some very obvious and also some very interesting reasons. It's all the publicity. It's all the viewership, the fact that he is so seen out there. He is the name that we continue to think of. Let's speed things up a bit. We're 2 for 2. If I give you Maverick CEO. Richard Branson, yes, okay. We haven't missed one yet. Let's keep going. Computer mogul. It's got to be Bill Gates, right? We haven't missed one. Keep going. Daytime TV talk show, there's only one. It's got to be Oprah. I have a sneaking suspicion that in 30 years from now, given that she's already stopped doing this, people will still say Oprah. I think that will happen. Watch this space. Let's keep going. Car show. Top Gear. Give me a name. Jeremy Clarkson. Okay. The man himself. Do you watch this show at all? It's excellent. We can learn a lot from this one as well. Now, the fascinating thing is there are hundreds, perhaps even thousands of car shows around the world every single day. Why this one? And why that man? What is he doing that is different in his industry that makes him stand out, that causes him to be a voice, that when I stand up here at the tip of Africa and say car show, we think Jeremy Clarkson? There are some lessons we can learn there. How about New York business tycoon? I'll give you a clue, with really bad hair. Donald Trump. Yes, of course it is. Now, interesting question. Which show is he being interviewed on? Larry King Live. Fairly obvious. You can see his profile even if you can't see his face. Do you think if I had to cut Larry King's profile out of that picture, do you think you'd still know what show it was? That's interesting. Okay, we can learn something fascinating there. Naughty men's magazines. I didn't know this one. I had to research it. Who's the biggest name? Who's the biggest name? Hugh Hefner. Hugh Hefner is the one on the right-hand side. Now, love it or hate it, this industry, this particular man has created a runaway phenomenon. It's all over the TV, girls of the Playboy Mansion. The girls move out of the Playboy Mansion and they start making documentaries about each of their lives. This, in terms of being a voice in your industry, is a runaway success story, and we can learn something from it. Who's that? Nigella. I didn't give you a name, I didn't give you an industry, I just gave you an outline, and you put it together. We haven't missed one yet. See, the reason I don't let people guess is the last time they said someone else's name, and that hurt my feelings. So the question then, of course, becomes, why not you? Why not your industry? And I'd like to look at this today from two different points of view. Both you as an individual, how can you be a greater voice in the world around you? But also, as an organization, as an association, how can you raise your voice and be heard, be known, be remembered? What are characters like this doing that we can actually learn from? Well, I suppose the first question is, why would we even want to bother? Why bother becoming a known name and a known expert? I have a simple explanation for this one. Take a moment to picture in your mind your target market, and this in your case is anyone who can potentially pick up and read a book. Anyone who has a hunger or a thirst for knowledge. Picture them all standing in one big crowd in your mind. Let's put them outside, standing out in the sun in a large group. Now, as you can imagine, anywhere in the world where a large group congregates, there's always someone looking to make a quick buck. In my mind, I always see a character that I call the Pie Man. And I don't know why, but I picture him with these kind of straps over his shoulder, and he's got a little tray in front of him, and on that he has these piles of steaming hot pies, and you can smell the beef and the chicken, and what he's doing is he's walking around the edge of the crowd, and he's tapping people on the shoulder one by one. And when they turn around, he says, "Would you like to buy a pie?" And because of the sheer numbers, from time to time, he gets it right. And one person buys a pie. And if the pie man stops now and goes home, he has stopped earning money. His voice has ceased to be heard. He is no longer active in his industry. It's done. You don't want to be the pie man in your industry. So what do we want? Well, in your imagination, look over the heads of the people in that crowd to the hillside. On the hillside, we see the guru. This is the person that the whole crowd has assembled to listen to. They are there to hear what this person has to say. Or more importantly, they have come to him. You want to be the guru. You want to be the thought leadership in your industry. You want to be the organization and the individual that people come to because they want to. You don't have to sell one person at a time. You don't have to convince one person at a time. You want to be the thought leadership. Does that sound like an attractive prospect? Let's look at some ways that we can actually do that. I believe that an expert, a personality, someone with a voice exists at the intersection of three qualities. Now, that sounds like quite a complicated thing to say. Let me slow that one down. If you want to be an expert, you need three qualities. They are, on the top, personality. On your left-hand side, knowledge. And on the right-hand side, publicity. Take any one of those ones away, and you don't have an expert. I'll give you an example from a different industry to yours. Let's say the IT world. In every company, you get that one guy who knows everything about the computers and knows everything about the IT, but he struggles to talk to other human beings. Usually can't put a full sentence together. You ever met that person? Now there you have a subject matter expert, but the person is not perceived as an expert because they lack the personality. Now on the far side of that scale, you get the guy who just brags about everything but doesn't know anything. That is not an expert. But you put those two together and you have a very powerful combination. The knowledge and the personality, the charisma. Then you need only one more thing to make it come alive, and that is publicity. You've got to put it out there. You've got to put it out into the universe. Think about this one for a second. Jeremy Clarkson with the cars on Top Gear. There are journalists who know more about cars than Jeremy Clarkson. He doesn't have the most knowledge in the world, but he does have the personality. And he takes the personality and he takes the knowledge, puts them together, and sends them out into the world, and it's a powerful, powerful combination. There are a number of things that you can actually do to raise your profile and create a voice. But the most important thing, the very first principle, if you don't get this one right, nothing else works, is you have to want to. Does that sound fair? I know my mom, as a librarian, is a very conservative person. She's got a wicked sense of humor if you get her going. But she doesn't like speaking in public. She's not much of an extroverted personality. She's a fairly quiet person. and she would rather not be a public figure. The first step in being a voice in your industry is you actually have to want to. It's not about showing off. There is something immensely noble that you do every single day. We need your industry. Think about it this way. The next time you feel that you want to be that reserved personality and not get involved in anything that puts a voice out there, who are you depriving of knowledge? Who are you depriving of a life because of the gold that you have to offer? Let's make that small sacrifice and actually want to be a voice. Beyond that, there are 10 things that you can do, practically speaking. The first one, be a producer. Be a producer. That's your first take-home idea. It raises the question, be a producer of what? And the answer is, it doesn't matter. Be a producer of something. Let me explain what I mean to you. When I first started off as a speaker myself, I work with an agency, and I went to this lady who was very experienced and knew a lot about the business of speaking. And I said to her, what can I do to become a known voice, to become higher profile in my industry? And she said, these are her own words, not mine. She says, Doug, if you write a book, you're seen as one step down from God. Okay? And I learned something interesting from that. What she was saying is that when you produce something, some kind of thought leadership, people take you seriously. And it's a funny thing because the book doesn't have to be very good. It's the fact that you're doing it. Now, it doesn't just have to be a book. I'm not saying you need to write a book. I'm saying, what can you be a producer of? The simplest one is an article. The Caxton newspapers in any of your areas are always hungry for contributions. Are you producing articles? Are you producing thought leadership? Are you appearing on the radio, on the television? Are you doing interviews? Are you standing up? Are you producing thought leadership? Now, thought leadership sounds like a very sort of classy, out there term. It's actually very simple. All it means is ideas that people can learn from. You know more about your industry than the people out on the street do. That qualifies you to practice thought leadership. If you don't know where to start in terms of what to write about, there are many different places you can start. Here's one for you. Start where the problem is. Start where the pain is. In my industry as a speaker, one of the problems that I face is that people overuse charts and graphs and PowerPoint and things like that to the point where they actually destroy public speaking. Have you ever sat through a death by PowerPoint presentation? You know, it's like one slide after another, charts and graphs, and eventually you sit there going, I must kill the Pope. That is an opportunity for me to practice thought leadership. I can write articles about that. I can go to radio stations and say, this is a problem business people are facing. Can I talk about it? And that's a way to get your voice out. Start where the pain is. Be a producer of something. That's number one. Number two, appearance is everything. So appear. That was a little sneaky, wasn't it? I'm not saying that it matters what you look like. Appearance is everything, so appear. In any industry, you need to be seen. You need to find the public forums from which you can speak, through which you can give thought leadership. You've got to be active in getting out there. That might mean getting onto Cape Talk or 702. That might mean telling the Caxton newspapers that you are available. That probably means going to industry events and asking for 5 minutes on the agenda. There's nothing quite as powerful as standing in front of a group of people, making eye contact with them, and delivering a message. Appearance is everything, so appear. When an industry or an organization disappears out of the public's thinking, out of our radar, it becomes obsolete, even if it's a good idea. Appearance is everything, so appear. The third one, develop a public title. I believe in what I call an EST title. EST, as in longest, biggest, greatest, furthest, whatever the case might be. Something that sets you apart from everybody else. Here's an example. A couple of years ago, a friend of mine from Zimbabwe, also a professional speaker, decided that he would move down to South Africa and start working as a speaker here. But now he had a problem. Back home in Zimbabwe, he was very well known. Here, no one had ever heard of his name. So what he did was he set out to create a public title on purpose. And what he wanted to go for was longest. Before your imagination carries away with you, let me tell you what I mean. He went to the Guinness Book of World Records and looked up the longest motivational speech of all time and found out that it was 22 consecutive hours. And thought to himself, I can beat that. And did. Now that's an astonishing thing to do. What he did was he found a way to create a title for himself. He did something spectacular. You know, whenever we're doing anything to do with raising awareness of our organization, our association, our business, we tend to think very conservatively. How about taking a moment and thinking, could you do something that is way out there and attention-getting? Can you develop an EST title on purpose, something that is biggest, greatest, fastest, longest, and get yourself that media recognition as a result? This car over here, what EST title does that enjoy? Someone said it, say it louder. Fastest, yes, fastest production car in the world. If you ever watch Top Gear, you'd be interested to learn they make that thing at a financial loss. Why would you do that? Well, it's so that they can have that title. We make the fastest car in the world. Now, in the States, if you watch Top Gear, a while back, someone came out with something slightly faster. So the guys at Bugatti said, well, that's not good enough. The engineers got together and they made the Super RS Sport Cup, whatever, Quattro Turbo version of that thing, and it is once again the fastest car in the world. And they did it on purpose because it's worth it. Point number 3, develop an EST title. Number 4, this is one that I quite like. Champion a cause. Champion a cause. We'll get to that little sub-headline in just a moment. There's a show that I once watched. I've only ever seen one episode. It was on DSTV, and it's called Mary Queen of Shops. Anyone here ever seen that? Okay. The basic concept goes like this. It's set in London, and they find stores that are failing, businesses that are falling apart. And this lady comes in, and she turns them around, breathes new life into them, and gets them going again. She makes them profitable. The one episode that I saw went like this. The consultant comes in, and she finds that the store she's trying to save is a store selling clothes to plus-sized ladies. All the right clothes for all the voluptuous women out there that real men kind of like. But now here's the interesting thing. The lady who was running the store had 2 jobs. The one was selling clothes to plus-sized ladies. The other was as a gym instructor. Do you see the disconnect here? Now, she was a fitness fanatic, and she didn't like her customers. They would walk into the store, and she would say things like, yeah, this one over here will help you to hide the rolls of fat, and they identified that the single biggest thing that this lady could do to turn her store around was to understand her own cause. When you're selling clothes to plus-sized ladies, you're not just selling fabric. You are selling a type of thinking. You are selling a cause. You are selling fashion advice to voluptuous women. You are selling ideas on all the latest trends, all the right thoughts for big gals. You have a built-in cause, and if you don't understand it, your customers will go elsewhere. She didn't like her own customers. They turned that store around, and the interesting part for me is they turned the owner of the store into a practitioner of thought leadership. She would appear on radios and give tips for plus-sized ladies, the right sizes, the right colors, the right things to... And she had a cause built in. All of the PR that she needed was already ingrained in what she did. She just didn't recognize it. Now, I say there, don't forget the romance. I was thinking quite deeply about the idea of libraries. And I was wondering how much of a threat things like Google and the developing technologies, Kindles, iPads, and so on, how much of a threat that might be to an organization like yours. And I thought to myself, there are different ways of competing with a Google and a Kindle and things like that. The first and most obvious one is take them on board, use them, make them a part of what you do. And I was thrilled to hear about the libraries going online. But perhaps the next one is, if you can't compete, don't. Do something different. There's something more romantic about a library than there is about a piece of technology. I tell you now, I was talking to my wife last night, and we were talking about how both of us used libraries growing up. And she says one of her fondest memories is of being 5 years old, being left alone on a little blanket, this gets me choked up, with her own little book in a private space that she could flip through in her own space and time. That's romantic, and it's actually kind of beautiful. There is something that you have that technology can't necessarily offer. So when you are working out what your cause actually is, it might not be what you think it is. Think laterally on that one. Number 5, if you can't compete, don't. Number 6, use high-impact communication. This one's close to my heart. Do you know which particular space shuttle that is? It's the Challenger. The photo that you are looking at, 73 seconds after that photograph was taken, that space shuttle blew up. The 5 men and 2 women on board in that photo that you can see lost their lives as a result. One of the very emotional facts that came out of this one when they did the reconnaissance afterwards, they found their cabin. And inside the cabin, there are levers that are locked into place against this great thrust of takeoff. And they discovered in the wreckage that these levers had been manually unlocked. And what that tells us is that in the time after that photo was taken, in that little cabin, those 5 men and 2 women were fighting to save their own lives. But now the most interesting thing that came out of that for me is that the scientists knew this was going to happen. They had all the information necessary to realize that that was going to explode. So what did they do? They put together 1,000 pages of charts and graphs and dots and dashes, and they submitted it to the US Congress. Do you think the message got through? You know what would have been much more powerful? 1 page, red letters, it's going to explode, and an exclamation mark. There is a world of difference between having information and communicating a message. And it is so important for you to understand that. Why do I include that in this particular talk? Well, because I'm encouraging you to stand up and talk to your communities. I'm encouraging you to be a voice. The last thing I want you to do is stand up and give them fact after fact after fact after fact. You'll kill them stone dead. Don't do it. You need to understand messages. Messages are what matter to people. In other words, what does that mean to me in the audience? And if you can get your mind around that one, you'll be an incredibly powerful voice. Jeremy Clarkson's quite good at that. He talks in metaphors. You know, where most people would give facts about cars, he gives analogies about cars. A normal reporter might say something like, I don't really like the way the back of the car is designed. It doesn't quite look good to me. Jeremy Clarkson says, look at the rear end. It looks like a dog hunkering down to do its business. You'll never forget that. That's quite high impact. Most people would say something like, you know, your average supercar is quite hard to manage, but this one is smooth and easy. Not Jeremy Clarkson. He says, most supercars are like trying to push an elephant up the back stairs of a loft. But this one is like rubbing honey into Keira Knightley. You'll never forget it. Metaphors are a very powerful way of communicating ideas. Quick examples of that one. One of my co-authors on the book on leadership started an organization called the Ubuntu Mission. And the idea is very simple. He pulls in skilled businessmen and he teaches basic business skills at grassroots level free of charge. It's missionary work. But now, to raise funds for this thing, he has to go to corporate companies and he has to, get them to endorse it and help out with funds and fees and so on. So, Tony puts together a 45-slide presentation, and it has all the little wiggly lines showing poverty and unemployment stats in South Africa, and he shows it to me, and 5 slides in, I'm yawning. And I said to him, this is going to kill your cause stone dead. Let's do something a little bit more creative. Here's what we did. We got rid of all of his slides. We replaced them with one metaphor.